last paragraph, says, as we face challenges in the 21st century, we need to recapture the perception of God that is so vividly reflected in the book of Daniel. According to this book, the God whom we serve not only drives the forces of history through his sovereignty, but also mercifully intervenes in the lives of his people to provide them with crucial help in the time of need. Did any part of your brain go, wait a second? Would you have expressed it like that? Any part of it say, I'd like it rephrased, please. Can we just rephrase that, please? Drives the forces of human history. Does that mean God drove Judah into rebellion so that they could go into Babylonian captivity? It was God behind their rebellion. God was driving them into paganism. Is that what that means? I don't like the idea, God. When you drive your car, who's making the decision on which roads you go down? I don't like this term, drives. I just don't like it. Or when a sheep herder or a cattle rancher is driving his herd. Do we see God with a whip behind us driving the forces down a certain path? I don't like it. I don't like it. I think it's rightly understand these things, we must realize there are two antagonistic systems fighting on planet Earth. God and his kingdom of truth, love, and freedom against Satan and his kingdom of lies, selfishness, and coercion. If we forget these two factors are fighting, and God never uses Satan's methods. This is Satan's goal, to get us to accept that God is the source of pain, inflicted punishments, death, suffering. Some people will object, but you just said a moment ago about the flood. You just said a moment ago about this action. Well, is he not bringing pain? I'm talking about non-therapeutic actions. Has anybody ever been inside an OR suite when a hip was being replaced by an orthopedic surgeon? Mm-hmm. I have been in the suite watching. Do you know it appears quite violent? Seriously, they take a saw, they cut the bone, they will take a hammer, and they will drive with force down into that bone, a pin and a rod. And it will have sometimes two people, if the guy's big and large, two people pulling with all their strength. It looks quite violent. A lot of force is being used, moving against the natural order of the body. Is that harmful, destructive, evil? No, many people misunderstand. But how about if you took a primitive, somebody who has no knowledge of modern medicine, and they just got to view what was happening in the OR suite? Might they think this was the most horrid form of medieval torture going on, where they're cutting people up and driving stuff into their bodies? This is a horrible, mean, perverse society. This is how many view God's actions in Old Testament times, when he therapeutically did use power. But he never uses power to coerce. He never uses power to force hearts and minds. He uses power to restrain and to heal.
But don't you think it's the word, the use of the word, I'm coming to punish you, I'm going to take them and use them as my weapon against you, and I'm bringing this group against the way the Old Testament's word.
Yes, because people misunderstand reality. How many of you parents have ever had a rule for your children not to play in the street when they were small? Did you ever have a rule like that? How about if you lived in a busy city with a busy street? My grandmother, when I was growing up, she lived on the main street of a city, and her house was one of those houses that had, you came out, you stepped off the front porch, immediately onto a sidewalk, and there was only the width of the sidewalk, and then there was the curb of the traffic. And it was a heavy, heavy trafficked street. There was a rule for us not to play in the street. And if your child were to play in the street, what would a loving parent do, assuming the child played and had not yet been hit by a car? Would the parent intervene with some type of threat? Would they? Would the parent step in and inflict upon the child something the child experiences as perhaps painful? Would they? Would they do that? And if we talk to the child, Linda, and said to the child, why is it wrong to play in the street? The child very likely will say, because mommy and daddy has a rule. Well, if you disobey the rule, what makes it wrong? What's bad about disobeying the rule? What might the child say? Mommy and daddy will punish me. Okay? Now, is this in reality why it's bad to play in the street? No. So notice the love of the parent. The love, and this is the Old Testament. The parent loves the child so much that the parent is willing to step in between the child and the reality and allow for a period of time for the child to view the parent as the source of pain and suffering. In order to protect the child from the real harm that comes from breaking design law, the laws of physics, when their body gets hit by the car. Long enough for the child to grow up into maturity, read Hebrews 5 and 6, and when the child, all of us, have grown up into maturity, do we all look back and go, thank you, Mom and Dad, for the rule, for the spanking that you gave me, because had you not, I would have likely been killed by a car playing in the street. That is what God is waiting for his mature people to read the Old Testament and understand that these people were running toward a cliff of idolatrous destruction of their characters and minds. They didn't understand it destroys you to worship false gods. And so God stepped in between them and that destructive reality, took upon his shoulders the willingness to allow himself to be viewed as the source of pain and suffering, even though he was not. That's how I read it. But many children still don't understand. And that's why we're called to grow up.